if you don't have 1 million ringgit per child, don't bother. Just don't have those kids.
Okay, as much as we love our Asian values and we hold on to them, we love the fact that we think as a community and not as individuals, which I think is something to celebrate, filling in this sandwich. How do they navigate a potentially hard conversation with their parents? Parents will say, I brought you up, I gave you everything, I sacrificed my life for you, and now you don't want to take care of me, you want to abandon me. So we have Rejina back on set on Debonair, and today we're talking about the sandwich generation. So essentially what that is on one side, you've got your children. On the other side, the other slice of bread are your parents, and you're the filling. You're right in between, being sandwiched between both, and you're squeezed in between love and responsibility. So who is this filling? Who are we talking about?
That's me.
That's you. Okay.
I mean, apart from me, I mean, a lot of people within the ages of 30 to 50s are basically in this sandwich, right? That sandwich filling. And because the fact that you also have, unfortunately, the fact that we are Asians, so you've got the cultural expectations as well, and that adds that pressure. So hence the squeeze, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've got aging parents right now, and it really is emotionally quite draining. I'm lucky that I had my kids earlier, so now they're adults and independent. But, you know, just having to deal with aging parents, that can be emotionally very draining. And I can't imagine for those people who also have to worry about the financial aspects of that is even going to be even more stressful, right? So I think that's where that we don't take that into account for a lot of people, and especially for women in particular, because we're the default caretakers, right? Yeah.
So what numbers are we talking about here? If you say individuals between the ages of what, your late 30s, 40s, 50s?
So 30s to 50s. So if you think about it, 80% of Malaysians are between the ages of 18 to 54. So technically, you know, that's a big chunk of Malaysians who are actually in that middle segment that's having to deal with that. And the fact also remains that we're slowly being an aging society. So by 2030, you've got 16% of us that's going to be above the age of 65 or something like that. Yeah.
And you were talking about the Asian pressure or Asian values. There is a very big expectation that you take care of your parents, and that's a responsibility and expectation. So how do people navigate this? Is it changing? Are the older generations taking more responsibility and learning to take care of themselves, and then how do people like us in between, how do we navigate that?
So I think I see it in different ways. One is the fact you've got a lot more people like me who've got children who live overseas. So then who's going to take care of me when, you know, if my kids are all overseas, right? So I know that I want to be a lot more independent compared to my parents' generation, right? So I think also the fact that the cost of care is also very expensive. So it doesn't make sense for a lot of Malaysians for them to think that their kids are going to take care of them, and yet the cost of living, cost of care, and everything else is going up. So how do you deal with that? Yeah. So I think the mindset needs to be changed to think that why is it that we always have to think that the default is our children or someone's going to take care of us? And I think that mindset is slowly changing because the numbers just don't add up, right? So yeah.
Well, putting the sort of the cultural traditions aside, I think the reality is changing. Like you said, it's not realistic. Yeah. It's not feasible anymore from just financially, and also you say the children are not in the country physically here. So there's a lot of factors that are going to push for change, whether we like it or not.
Correct.
So you better be prepared.
Yeah, because before, like, so when my kids were growing up, technically I think the cost of having a maid was only about 500 ringgit. That's now about 2,000 ringgit, right? 1,008 to 2,000 ringgit for a maid. So that's monthly costs. So that's already a significant chunk of most people, because if you look at our salaries in Malaysia, actually, when I started working 30 odd years ago, basically it was 1,005. But apparently there are some people who are still getting 1,005 as their first job. So that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Yeah.
Well, how would people begin to have this conversation if people are watching and they are the filling in this sandwich? How do they navigate a potentially hard conversation with their parents? Because parents will say, I brought you up, I gave you everything, I sacrificed my life for you, and now you don't want to take care of me, you want to abandon me, and that's so selfish. So you have that potential. That's one way the conversation could go. Also, the kids just may not financially be able to, and parents may also just be sick, where then the care required is also something beyond what you can offer, right? And then obviously that becomes just a very difficult conversation to have, and I can imagine a lot of families, the kids may avoid having the conversation. So what would you say? How do you begin to navigate this?
So it's probably more difficult to have that conversation with your parents rather than with your children, right? With your children, at least you can have that conversation earlier on, so to say like, what's going to happen if I'm growing older? Are you going to be around? Would you accept me in your home as such? Because...
Oh, you're saying to ask, like to point blank ask that question. Yeah. Can I live with you?
Yeah, it's like thing. And, so it's like I've had this conversation with my mom, and my mom goes, I don't want to live with you, right? But practically speaking, a lot of parents, I mean, just imagine yourself in like 30 years or whatever, you still want your own independence. You've always had your own home. So you can't imagine that suddenly it's like, hey, you only get a little room or a little corner of a house to live the rest of your life, right? So I think that conversation needs to be done. I mean, it's not easy. It's never easy when it comes to the fact that, because it's very emotional, right? Yeah. So, but at the same time, it's also nursing home, retirement homes are also changing, right? Yeah. They're a lot better equipped now, and they're a lot more fancy as well. And it's also because they've got a nice community going, so it's not as if it's like a place where you're just left there to die. So I think that mindset is changing, and I see a lot more people, especially maybe people in their 60s and all that, are thinking, okay, I can't depend on my children. I'm going to invest in something like that for myself, like assisted homes and stuff like that, because it's a practical thing to do, right? But yeah, culturally it's very difficult because at the end of the day, you're going to get that your typical mom who's going to say, you don't love me as much as I love you type thing, anak kurang ajar, whatever it is, right? So yeah, difficult, but it's got to be said, and that conversation has to happen before things really deteriorate, because you think about it, you've got your non-communicable diseases like diabetes is on the rise. Cancer is now an aging disease effectively. And so if you think about it, the cost of healthcare in itself, it's the fact that the inflation within this year alone, in the last few months, it's actually grown double digits in terms of medical inflation. So
that's crazy.
So how do you actually prepare for something like this? Because even if you're very careful in terms of your money and you're great at planning, and what do you mean by planning, right? So it's like going back and figuring out what are your numbers. At the end of the day, how do you beat inflation that's growing exponentially? You can't.
You just have to prepare better.
That's right. So which means that conversation needs to happen, because it cannot be that most Malaysians are going to have to say like, yes, someone brought you up, but does that mean that you're also having to deal with the fact that as a woman especially, you're going to have to deal with both your parents and your in-laws, and that's quite a bad deal. Sorry.
So if you're 50, you should have a retirement plan in place, and your children are not your retirement plan.
Yes.
But if someone doesn't have something in place, when is it too late? Does it reach a point where, okay, you know what, you're already retired, you don't have enough savings,
Most people are at that point. At that point, right?
You're going to end up relying on your family, your community to some degree, or
and
other.
that's why then suddenly everyone goes, hey, I need to do a side business or whatever lah. And that's exactly what's happening, right? For a lot of Malaysians, because basically, they use their EPF money, most of them, right? Yeah. And then within 3 years, it's all gone because it's either gone to a fancy holiday, a new car, or the kid's wedding.
And then suddenly you get sick. Something like that would happen.
Sick, yeah. Or you get thrown out of your house because your kids decide that, hey,
there's no space for you.
There's
You're too costly.
Yeah. What do you do, right? So which is why I think, that conversation about retirement, I can't emphasize it enough that, Malaysians really need to think about retirement earlier on, because then you at least have that time, and if you squirrel away bit by bit, it's better than having to deal with the fact that, hey, if you start later in life, that short timing, at the same time you don't have the ability to absorb that risk, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't say, like, if you put 100,000 when you're 25, but if you put 100,000 at 55, it's not the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about the difference between rich Malaysians and poorer Malaysians? Do poorer Malaysians have the same sort of retirement plans? Or do they rely more on their families? Or the nature of your job doesn't allow you to build that kind of savings? Is there a different psyche towards retirement? Because
I think for a lot of Malaysians, whether they're rich or they're poor, they still always think that the kids are going to take care of me. And it's not just Malaysians, yeah? So I've got my two best friends are Singaporean. They live in Singapore. And they've got these massive houses. And I asked them, why do you need such big fancy houses? The kids are all going to leave you anyway. Oh, no, because when I'm older, the kids are going to take care of me. I'm like, why should they? Oh, because I gave them life. That sort of thing, right?
That's
I'm like,
dangerous.
no, I completely disagree. I said, you never wanted to live with your parents after you left the home. Why should they want to live with you just because you've got a nice, spanking, big, massive house, right? So at the end of the day, you think that it's just a Malaysian thing, but it's also Singaporeans are the same.
I started modeling at 15, founded Fuji School at 23, became Miss Universe Malaysia at 26. And now at 39, I've created Debonair as a space to keep learning, to ask questions, and to invest in knowledge. For me, this journey as a content creator is proof that it's never too late to pivot, to grow, and to find new ways to invest in you. That's why Kenanga Investors' message, Invest in You, resonates so deeply with me. So subscribe to Debonair Podcast and be part of this journey. And if you're ready to take the next step, visit kenangainvestors.com.my to explore opportunities for your future.
A friend of mine actually, her dad lives overseas, and he bought this big home, and it was built. It's got 4 bedrooms. It's a bit out of KL, and he set it up for everyone to come live there, but one child is in another Australia, and the other kids are like, I don't want to live there.
There you go.
So you've got this big, massive house that you've got now, and
then he's got to worry about the maintenance costs and stuff like that.
And as you get older, you don't want to climb up 3 stories. You don't want to have to deal with the dust and all of that.
Yeah. Because then you need 2 maids and everything else. You need the gardener and stuff like that. So it's just too costly, right? So at the end of the day, I think you need to have that practical talk with both parents and the younger generation. What's going to happen in the future? You're going to have different scenarios. What happens if you get sick and stuff like that, Do you have enough insurance coverage? What are your priorities in life? And a lot of people, especially when they have younger kids, their priority is only the kid, that they forget about their entire life apart from that. They don't have friends, they don't do anything else, but it's just the kid. Everything goes to this kid, right? But then that's where, once the kid grows up and then they leave the nest, what happens? Yeah.
Actually, you make a really good point, because there's this guilt. I think there's a guilt surrounding that, where you feel that you need to sacrifice, and if you don't, you feel like a guilty parent. So you invest as much as you can in your child. But like like an analogy of the oxygen mask, right? Which if you don't take care of you and your future, and I feel like my grandparents, like my Asian grandparents, were like this, where my grandmother was the sweetest soul you would ever find, right? It's like an angel, and she would give to others all the time. But eventually, when she got old, she just became fully dependent. And of course, the family would take care of her, my father, and whatever her needs were, you would cater to it. But you don't realize that self-sacrificial aspect of you actually, in the long term, actually harms the people around you. If you want to look at it that way, if you know what I mean. Because you become, let's say, a burden, but the things that you didn't do to take care of yourself have now affected you, and now we've got to take care of you because of that. Yeah. So it's a delayed...
Same story. I've got a really good friend. His mom is just 92 or whatever. So he tells me, Rejina, it's no longer about love, but this is purely duty, because it gets to the point where it's so difficult. It's emotionally draining. It's financially draining as well. And, and it's horrible for him to say like, hey, but, I hope eventually that she'll pass on. But it sounds horrible. But at the same time, it's like you want your loved ones to go in a nice way, and you don't want it to be with any animosity, right? But because of this pressure for culturally that you're expected to do the good thing and the right thing, at the end of the day, it messes things up. And, how many people have mental issues because of the fact that they're the main caretaker?
I think the emotional stress of that is something we do not recognize enough.
Yeah, exactly. So, let's talk about the fact that you've got children, you've got parents, but let's say if you had, kids who are neurodivergent, right? And there's a rise of kids who have autisms and stuff like that. So there's tax reliefs and stuff like that. But the cost of actually handling of raising an autistic child is not cheap, right? So basically it's between 4,000 to basically 8,000 ringgit a month for this would be preschool, right? So if you were to ask most Malaysians, do they actually have the ability to spend about at least a good 30,000 a year with maximizing all the tax reliefs that you have? Most probably not, because if you look at your average salaries in Malaysia, I think it's about 5,000 ringgit. So if your kid needs schooling that's at least 6,000 ringgit a month, what are you going to do, right? So that's why you have families who are double income, earning 20,000 ringgit, but because let's say they've got an autistic child, and they've got parents who are diabetic with no medical insurance. So if you start looking at Malaysians with medical insurance, above 60, apparently it's just, the numbers are like less than 15%. So, and even when it comes to normal Malaysians, the medical insurance coverage is apparently, it's really, less than half.
Wow. So go out and get insurance, health insurance.
Yes, early.
Everyone should have it, and as early as possible.
Even
if you're 21, you're 30, get it.
Yes.
Because you never know what can happen.
Yeah, so it's like one of my staff was saying that she needed to go for a stomach checkup or whatever it is, and it's going to cost her 5,000. But because her insurance coverage is less than 2 years, the insurance won't cover it. So at the same time, so if you do it really late and you're going to get more unhealthy as you grow older, that's going to be very expensive, and you're going to have to fork it out, right? You're not going to say like, okay, I'm going to wait until the insurance sorts it out. Do I have the time? Yeah.
So don't wait, get your insurance. You never know, especially when you look around. There's a lot of health-wise sudden diseases that you see people afflicted with, and it's quite scary, but you better be prepared for anything. So that's on that health for just you as an individual. But then you make an interesting point with children. I think children are very costly nowadays, and you have a lot of families actually, when they do their family planning, they're thinking about not just how many kids would I like to have, but really how much is this going to cost me? And that becomes a big factor in determining how many children to have. And I don't know that, once again, is this for all levels of society? Is this something maybe the more affluent you are, the more you think about it? I'm not sure. But then your point you make on top of that is a lot more children are being born with learning disabilities and other forms of challenges, right?
Yeah, because it's also the food that we eat, right? So anyway, I mean, for me, if you don't have 1 million ringgit per child, don't bother. Just don't have those kids.
Okay, that's a bold statement to make.
Yep.
Is it? How are you calculating this 1 million?
So no, because if you think about it, so if you're talking about your middle class Malaysian and stuff like that, chances are you've got tuition to worry about, you've got all the medical costs, you've got all the extra
activities,
your coding classes, your ballet, your taekwondo, blah blah blah, right? So you just add that up for at least a good 18 years. And the fact that education cost has also risen, right? So if you're talking about a degree in the UK now is what, 14 to 20,000 pounds.
So does your million include university?
So let's say you're going up to at least 18 years, right? So even if it's school, so private schools, international schools, you're going to have to worry about between 40,000 ringgit to 100,000 ringgit a year. That's just school fees. It's not including your uniforms, and of course the school trips, right? You know, you don't want to be that parent that says, you can't go because we can't afford it, right?
Yeah.
So then it gets expensive because it adds up. Because plus the fact that you've got inflation to worry about as well, that's when it just goes up, which is why I'm saying if you don't have 1 million ringgit, you really got to start thinking about the fact because you've got also even just giving birth is so costly now.
In a government hospital?
In a government hospital, okay, so it's a bit cheaper, but you also have to worry about the fact that now it's on trend, right? You've got to go to those fancy, the confinement centers, stay there for a month. Apparently it's about 30,000. So it is expensive. Having a family is expensive.
There are a lot of hidden costs that you don't factor for.
Yeah, because when you're saying I do to the wedding and stuff like that, and you say, oh, I want to have a nice family and stuff like that, do you have that conversation that is going to be costly? How much it's going to cost to raise a family? No, you don't. And, I was lucky enough that, I had my kids early and to the point where I was also, and my career trajectory and my salary trajectory outpaced the cost of living. But that's not the case for most Malaysians. So how do you deal with it? So you're going to have to figure out what sort of lifestyle is something that you are comfortable with and the kind of lifestyle that you want to give your children. And for most parents, you obviously want to say, like, I want to give them a better life than what I had.
Yes.
Right? But how much is that going to cost you? So you've got to worry about that. And especially if you've never had that conversation with your parents, and suddenly parents are going like, hey, I'm now diabetic, can you pay for this? What do you do? Yeah.
So what help is out there?
Planning. Going back to what's your numbers? What are your numbers? What are your parents' numbers? You're going to have to worry about the fact that you probably need to factor that in. And because you've got that emotional pressure from your parents, that you're not going to be able to say, like, I don't want to pay for you, right? So you're going to have to ask them, how much is it going to cost? So if you're not covered, if your parent is not covered by the government and they need to go, you're not going to say like, oh, I can't bring you to what is it, KPJ as opposed to the government hospital just simply because, hey, gaji tak masuk lagi, which is a reality, right?
Yeah.
So what do? So you're going to have to plan ahead and actually take into account that it's going to cost, inflation's going to impact those numbers, and then what lifestyle are you prepared to live? Yeah.
So what schemes are out there? Are there government schemes? Like what, insurance? You talked about a few of these options.
So I think for most Malaysians, and we don't take we don't talk about this enough. So for instance, there's the SSPN savings. So you should actually, if you've got a child, do that, because at least it covers, not only you are able to save for your child's education, it also gives you insurance coverage. And it basically gives out returns about 3.8% in the last 10 years. So that's not bad, not great, but at the same time, not bad, right? Because you also get the insurance coverage. It also covers you as the person that's paying for that. So that's one. Other things is that, I think most Malaysians are going to have to figure out like, hey, I'm going to need to be able to go to a general hospital, a public hospital, and not always opt for the private side, because the more complicated your health is, actually the best doctors and the best machines are actually in public hospitals. Yeah.
And for the filling, for the people that are actually having to deal with this on both sides, what should they be doing? Because you're thinking about the kids, they're thinking about their parents, right? And planning, those would be more immediate needs, right? And some long-term needs, but also very more immediate needs. And then for them, they would probably come in last.
Yes.
Thinking about what their needs are, not today, but their future. So their retirement plans. What should they also be balancing in this whole conversation?
Yeah, so to me, it's always a matter of like oxygen mask again. So if you have 5,000 ringgit or whatever that you get a month, is make sure that you at least squirrel away 20%, right, on top of your EPF if you're working. If you're not working, you should also make sure that your husband is able to provide you with your Aisaraan or whatever, within the Aisuri, which is basically for your wife. But you can also top up on your own, right? So let's say if you do a side business, the cake business or whatever, put some aside, because at least you've got some savings. Because you'll be amazed at the fact that, so rule of 72, so the fact that EPF in the last 20 years has given pretty much almost close to 6%. So technically that would take you 12 years to double your money. So if you keep doing this consistently, and hopefully EPF continues to give out pretty good returns, then technically you should be able to just continue increasing your savings quite effectively, right? So, but at least 20% should be squirreled away before you figure out, okay, your child needs this tuition or whatever. But I think we also need to also realize that we need to move away from dependency on tuition, because a lot of Asian kids I see are so dependent on tuition. By the time they get to uni, there's no tuition at uni, right? You're going to have to figure out things on your own. So I think you should actually teach kids early on that they've got to work on their own effort and the ability to think and not get everything spoon-fed.
But then that's a cost saving on...
Also, because it's 150 ringgit.
Well, then it's like, how do parents think? Because you're thinking, I need to give my kids everything, tuition, this class, that class, and by the time they're 5, their entire calendar is more busy than yours and mine. So, is that what approach would you encourage?
I guess I've always taken the fact that for me, I guess I was quite a lazy mum in that sense.
Not a tiger mum.
I wasn't a tiger mum in the sense that I'm sure if my best friend sees this, they're going to say, no, that's nonsense. But technically, I wanted them to also be children. So I didn't pack their days too much. But again, this was also before social media, right? But also, I think the key thing was also the fact that even up to when they went to high school as such, the tuition basically was basically minimized, because I said, your A-levels or your IBs, you're not going to have tuition. You get to university, you're not going to get tuition. So you're going to have to figure that out yourself. And it's a balance lah. What is it that you want? Because at the end of the day, also there's a lot of jobs that's not going to be around in a couple of years, right? So whatever, if you're a computer science student right now, you graduate today, tomorrow the technology is already different. So how do you future-proof your child? So at the end of the day, it's a lot of thinking skills rather than just rote learning, right?
Yeah. And recognizing, like we said earlier, that Malaysia is moving towards an aging population. There's a whole chunk of generation that's going to be aging out, and you need to just start thinking about that reality. It is different. You cannot rely, as much as we love our Asian values and we hold on to them, and we love the fact that we think as a community and not as individuals, which I think is something to celebrate. We need to be planning. We need to also learn to not be overly dependent on others.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, we're also living in more urban areas now, right? So you're not going to have that sense of kampong community anymore, that your neighbor's going to help you out if you ran out of sugar or whatever it is, right? So I think we all need to move on and be a bit more independent in that sense. But at the same time, the values, the Asian values, I mean, obviously we want to make sure that we keep to them, but the reality is very, very costly, right? So we're going to have to plan a bit better, because we mustn't also rely on the government, right, for government handouts. And I think because
that's a good point.
Because they can't afford it. So because we don't want more taxes, I definitely don't want to be paying more taxes, because how is the government going to be able to provide these subsidies forever and ever if they don't increase the taxes? So if you don't want that, you're going to have to figure out how do you do it on your own without any handouts. And that's going to be a tough conversation, I reckon.
So to end on a high, what would you say?
It's not impossible. So at the end of the day, again, know your numbers, figure out what are your priorities. So even if you want to give the best to your child, so it doesn't mean that they have to go to London. It can still be around here. You could still have overseas education here.
Our education in Malaysia now is pretty awesome. It's getting better.
It's getting better. And you've got all these overseas universities, foreign universities who are based here now. So you could do that. You could do online learning. And also that learning doesn't have to stop at the normal ages, right? So your child can do a degree, first degree, up to work for a couple of years and then do their masters, right? So for me, I told my kids, my duty to you goes up to your first degree. If you want to do your masters, your problem lah.
All the best.
Yes, that's basically it. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and absolutely. Having those conversations really matter.
Yeah.
They're hard, they're tough,
Yes.
but you got to start and you got to break the cycle. So,
Exactly. Yeah, you got to break the cycle and start a new trend. Really.
Yep.
Yep.
So
There you go.
sandwich generation.
Yes.
Thank you, Kenanga Investors, for supporting this episode. Visit kenangainvestors.com.my to learn more.